I'm so excited today to interview my pal, my friend, my co-author, and the executive director of NCAP, Allison Davis Maxon. This is going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I want to start out by saying that people are going to have an opportunity to read your autobiography on the website. So this is a more personal interview, so they get a chance to understand you in a more personal way. So if I asked you to name 5 things that you want people to know about you professionally, what would they be, Allison?
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here because I love you. And yeah, for me, the first thing I think of when I was thinking about this interview was, I really do love what I do in every aspect of the work that I do. I love what I do. I feel like I was able to come into a field at the right time, find the right mentors, you being one of them, one of my favorite and most impactful mentors. But I've been able to fall into a field that I feel blessed to have come into at the time I came into the field. Also professionally, it's interesting because I do view myself as a little bit of a troublemaker. I'm a bit of a challenger. And in some ways, being in child welfare and in some of the systems in children's mental health and child welfare, I don't mind stirring the pot and making good trouble where we need to make good trouble. That we still have a long way to go. So, I don't mind challenging practices and protocols and things that really we do need to be doing differently. When I entered the field, I entered my first 10 years of clinical practice was in residential treatment with children who had been in child welfare and had suffered really significant abuse, neglect, multiple attachment disruptions. And I always say I cut my clinical teeth in those years, and it really helped me to form some of my own clinical orientation, as well as getting me extremely passionate about how children experience child welfare. And I try to frame it like this, at least for myself. When I went to graduate school, I read a lot of books and learned a lot of things like book learning and more formal education. And then I went to work in the field with our children of such tremendous trauma, attachment disruptions, neglect. And these were children, I was attacked and spit on, and all the things that happen when kids are that trauma reactive. And I didn't understand initially what I was seeing, and I triggered initially many of their trauma responses because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand children of high trauma and how trauma lives in the body and mind, and then coping strategies of children. And I really worked to open myself up to learn from them. And I have this collage when I left residential that the staff made for me. And I can go to every child and tell you what I learned from that child.
Wow.
What that child taught me, both about them, what they needed, and what they taught me about me, that I couldn't read from any book. So while the clinical and kind of research, the neuroscience, everything we get from, our studies is really important, every child is extremely different. And when we really open ourselves up to listen and learn from children and our teens about their pain, how and what they need to heal and learn and grow. And it led me into this world of attachment. I got nothing in graduate school on attachment. And now with a decade of the brain and the neurobiology of trauma and attachment, it's been amazing. But I always like to back out of that, because initially where I learned everything was from children and teens, and I still, they are in every way just imprinted on my soul. And that many of the children that come in, they don't get out. They spend a childhood in child welfare. And that wasn't acceptable then and still is not acceptable now. So it's one of the things that keeps me really passionate about this field and the work that I do and the work that NCAP does. The next thing I want to say really to you, Sharon, and all my mentors before, because I feel like everything I do, I'm standing on the backs and shoulders of those that have come before me. And I think of you and Deborah Silverstein and Carol Biddle and even those that I've not met personally, that I feel like I stand on the backs of those individuals, mentors like Thich Nhat Hanh and Bessel van der Kolk and Dan Siegel and others, that I really do feel blessed and thankful and have a sense of gratitude for those that have come before. So really anything that I feel like comes out of me has been learned in, so it may come out and sound a little differently, but I have that sense of gratitude professionally, because so many of the folks that have come before have done such innovative work and have been well before their time.
Thank you, Allison. That's just lovely, because you really underscored the whole piece about we each build on the previous generation of professionals' shoulders. And if we don't know where the research comes from, where the practice comes from, so that we can not repeat mistakes and build on what's good and solid and even expand it into newer areas, then we're failing the folks that we serve in child welfare, which is why I feel that this NCAP series is so important. So thank you for underscoring that. So, you are a lot of fun. You do a lot of things that have nothing to do with your professional career. Tell us maybe up to five things that you do that have nothing to do with the phenomenal work that you do.
Well, for one, my kind of first passion and full focus is, my family, my children, my family, of which you are a part of, right? My family, my circle of closest loved ones. And I'm a really social being. And I love my circle and love to celebrate and be with and enjoy, deep, meaningful conversations and relationships with those I love. So yeah, that's probably my first focus. Second, I really do consider myself a lifelong learner. I do try to approach new situations, new avenues of my own development, or new challenges in front of me, whether it's professionally or personally, with a beginner's mind. Like, what am I here to learn? And open myself up to that learning process. I just think we should never stop learning. I am a bit of an adventurer. I do have that, like, I like new places and new cultures and documentaries, and I just love to learn. I also, folks may not know, I really do love to read. I consider myself a total book nerd. Over COVID, because we had to hunker down so much, I started a book club with friends, and it's been super amazing, just even hearing how different folks from diverse backgrounds interpret and understand a book or a novel. I love kids and teenagers in particular, really everywhere. I'm from a big family. So for me, that always feels like I'd rather sit at the kid table. Like if we're at a gathering, I'm like, can I go sit with a kid? I just love kids and teens in particular.
Well, you're also an avid hiker and camper. I mean, you're an outdoorsy lady.
That's right. And we're going to Catalina next month. We're going to go to 2 harbors. We're going to do some kayaking. Yeah, in fact, we found so many great new hikes. I mean, we try to hike everywhere we go. Yeah, and I love yoga. So namaste to those folks that also do yoga and practice mindfulness, because those things have helped me just with on my own healing journey, as we're, for me, being in front of so much trauma and distress on a daily basis, really my whole life, and to still work to be as present and impactful as I can be doing that personal work has been critical on every level.
That was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. It really does reflect who you are.
Well, it's fun to talk about personal things, right? I'm like, normally I don't get to talk like this. So it's more fun than a training.
It rounds us out as people. And so, which really leads me to the next question, which really is, why this field? Why are you a therapist in attachment and trauma and adoption and permanency? You're not just a therapist, you're an incredible teacher, lecturer, and writer. So why? How'd you fall into this?
Sharon, it's funny, as I was thinking about the question, and when I go back to reflect on my own journey, I wasn't really in my early clinical years really intentional about, I want to work with this population. I kind of haphazardly fell into working in a residential treatment center with children of trauma, and I needed my clinical hours. I had to collect 3,000 hours. And those experiences, that was 10 years of my life, changed me from the inside out in every way. What else? I'm really passionate, and this is for me on every level, whether I'm at work or at home, really passionate about kids and children and keeping kids connected and diminishing their stress, especially as our culture has experienced a pandemic and all the social justice issues, that children are watching us and learning from us, and our teens that are in crisis all across this nation right now, really passionate about connecting with them and listening to them. I think we could do such a better job everywhere at really opening ourselves up to listening and learning from them. I can't tell a story or think of a nugget that I have that I didn't get from a child or a teen.
And you are grounded and compassionate, and were even, I'm sure, before you went into graduate school, which has also allowed you to embrace the other folks touched in the field. So you run an adult adoptee support group, and you actually worked with perpetrators in the early part of your career. And I think that gave you some insights into the folks that may have hurt the children that you have such compassion for. And I didn't know whether you wanted to comment on any of that.
Well, first of all, Sharon, I always love how you know so much more about me than most folks. You're right. I've worked with those 10 years in residential. I worked with many of our families that had abused their children. Most of them, the largest majority, were struggling with chronic addiction and had their own histories of trauma, which helped me to have compassion and understanding for where that pain comes from. And most of them are replicating intergenerational cycles of trauma, their own abuse histories that were never addressed, never healed, what I often call the walking wounded, that don't get the support or services, especially early enough, and can move into a whole lifetime of addiction to numb from the pain of early trauma and abuse. So I can also say I learned as much working with our birth first parents, that many of whom, or I should say most, reunify with the children that come into foster care or child welfare. The parents that aren't able to reunify and continue to struggle with addiction and cycles of more self-destructive behavior, really, I have a deep compassion for them as well. Many of them spent childhoods in care. Many of, when we emancipate youth from our foster care systems across this country, within 2 years, many are homeless and on the streets. And if the women end up pregnant, many of those kids come back into care, and we're repeating the cycles. So really impacting our child welfare systems and practices is so we're not repeating intergenerational trauma, and the system's able to go further upstream to provide the services, right, that our families really need.
Oh, beautifully said. So, you probably, I'm talking to you about retirement is kind of silly, but, because you probably got another 30, 40 years in the field. I'm aware that you're helping to form the next generation of social workers and therapists. And when you do retire, what do you want them to remember about your work? And if you had to design a gravestone for your professional life, what might it say on that gravestone?
Oh, such a good question. I would hope, and sometimes I go to maybe the simplest phrases, that for me, because this is a calling, and I feel that in every sense of the phrase, that if it could say, she listened, she learned, she felt, she grew, and she loved.
That is so you and so perfect.
Well, I feel similar to you, Sharon, because your light has touched me in so many ways, that, I'm really here in any way possible to be a light, to lessen the toxic stress and the pain and suffering and trauma in whatever way I can. It's what I wake up wanting to do, and what I go to bed thinking about. How can I just continue to have an impact in a positive way? Because children and teens and families that are at risk continue to suffer every day. So to do whatever I can to do my part to lessen that in some way.
Well, you are a light bringer wherever you go, not just in your office. I just want to remind you of that and let everybody know that if you have a chance to cross paths with Allison in person, you will feel that light. You'll feel that openness and that compassion. Everybody listening has something to learn from you. So if you wanted them to carry something specific away in terms of a lesson, a skill, a tool, a phrase, what might a couple of those be? Because you have so much information. Pick a couple that you want them to absolutely zero in on.
So for me, Sharon, when I think about that, there's kind of two things specifically that come to mind, especially for professionals, social workers, therapists, our mental health professionals, and our parents, that we really are here to connect. Really, our most primal need is our need to attach and connect and feel a deep sense of belonging, right? So when I go anywhere, I really do think about, I want to connect, I want to learn, who are these people? What's their story? Well, I could be anywhere, but that desire to connect, to opening ourselves up, to wanting to connect. And for me, the second part of that becomes that we're here to listen. In order to connect, you have to really be able to listen. And not just listen with our ears. Sometimes when I say listen, I always like to clarify. I don't mean listen with your ears. I mean listen with your heart space. So when we listen from here, and this can be especially true for parents, because the tendency is to think, well, I already know my kid. But especially as our kids age and evolve and develop, we don't always know what's in their hearts and how they're feeling. And when we listen, when we deeply listen, we can more attune to their needs. And whether it's a child or a grown-up or a culture or a community, when we really listen from our heart space, we hear something really different. And then we can actually connect in a different way. So for me, we can't go to like, oh, I'm just going to jump in and teach all this stuff to my kid, or I'm going to go into a community, I'm going to teach all this stuff to them. That always feels outside into me, that we have to work to really listen first, and really try to understand, which will promote that deep connection is our hope. That really we often espouse in child welfare to keep kids connected. That's one of our mantras, right? It's the foundation of which we wrote our book and kind of why we wrote our book. And our workbook is really all about helping parents really kind of understand some of these concepts. But so many of the children in child welfare are connected in foster care, have disconnection after disconnection after disconnection. And then we minimize that pain and suffering. We just don't even see it. We see behaviors. And I'm like, well, where do we think these behaviors come from? Right. This deep well of pain. So when we can really listen in a different way, we hear the need in a different way, and then we can build our programs or our curriculum or our interventions or our parent strategies on top of that. It just becomes, we can't put the cart before the horse.
Well, you always say something about not doing something without people. What's that phrase?
It's one of my favorite sayings. So one of the things, and I'll preface it a little bit, because one of the things I try to do, whether it's in program development or consulting or curriculum development or a training, that when we include lived voices, because it's very different if you hear Allison just talking about someone like a youth in care or a birth first parent, but when you invite the experiences of those that have lived it and their wisdom and their stories from their perspectives, then we hear it in a really different way. So our organization that Shauna Anders and I just founded and kickstarted, we have this amazing group of 10 individuals with lived experiences in foster care. They're the alum from foster care. And their mantra is, when you do something for me, without me, you're doing something to me. Mm-hmm. It's not inclusive of me. Mm-hmm. So when we include lived voices, and their hashtag is trauma to triumph, right? That our individuals from foster care have climbed the Mount Everest of trauma. So to make space for their lived experiences and ensure that they're part of any solution moving forward when we come up with these great new programs or new solutions in child welfare or in children's mental health connected to trauma, we have to include their wisdom and experiences on every level.
Yeah, thank you. I just really wanted to make sure that you didn't leave that out of your sharing, because it's such an important piece for everybody viewing this to understand in their work and what motivates you as well. As the executive director of NCAP, and I look at their website you know, to connect and strengthen and empower. You're so busy. You have such a big private practice and you do so much lecturing and you're writing. And so I wondered, what was it about this organization that you were willing to lend so much of yourself and time to? You make no money with it. You make space in your schedule for it. You nurture all the rest of us who are consultants in it. Why? Why is this important to you? What do you have a hope for this organization achieving?
Yeah. And you know, Sharon, that for me is really a kind of an easy question. For me, it's almost that no-brainer that we still, in my 30 years, and I know most of the folks in NCAP have more lived experience inside the system than I do, or professional experience connected to it. So many of the practices that I struggled with when I got into the system are still happening today.
Mhm.
And it's mind-boggling to me, frustrating on every level that we have not, as a child welfare system, we're still so siloed into our own practices, beliefs, policies, regulations, and we're not integrating so much of the research and wisdom and knowledge from other sectors. So think about attachment and neuroscience, child development, children's mental health. We would be mashing up and integrating, so think about child welfare, integrating the silo of mental health, children's mental health. So how would we best support our birth first families that need support due to histories of addiction and their own adverse childhood experiences? They fall into child welfare, and do they get really the specialized mental health support that the whole family system needs? It's still a pretty punitive system that puts a pretty rigid timeline without the right kinds of services that families most need. So we have this whole other silo that we've not been able to integrate well. So for me, it's when you can pull together what we've learned from research and how to get best practices and research, even from other sectors, integrated into what we know would have the best impact for families and potentially change the outcomes for the better for all parties that are connected to child welfare. And we're still not there. So it's why I'm so passionate about NCAP, because not only do we have an amazing group of researchers, but we also have practitioners, clinical practice folks that get us to implementation of some of the research. So for me, I like to move much more quickly than just sometimes that snail's pace of like we're still crawling along, making some of the same mistakes we've been making for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said. Thank you. Any quick last thoughts? Because this has been a joy for me, and I thank you for sharing so much of your personality and your wisdom and your hope. Any last thought you want to contribute?
Yes, I think I would say something to any individual that's a professional that's listening to this, that if you're a professional, first of all, I thank you for hopefully staying committed and all in, 2 feet in, to help us get to change and support kids and families, to take really good care of yourself. That for me, one of the things I was really able to begin to do, and I only learned this from great mentors, is that your very best tool is always yourself. This kind of thing right here. And you cannot neglect yourself. So to keep your tool sharpened to whatever works for you, both emotionally and intellectually, to take really good care of your most valuable asset, which really is you and your authentic self. So whatever lights you up, both professionally and personally, keep doing that thing. Otherwise, it's really easy to burn out inside of our systems that still have tremendous challenges, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much.